everybody hear me tonight on this? Okay, good. This kind of limits my movement, which is like suffocating. People know I'd like to move around a lot. One of the greatest problems with many candidates in recent years is that it's often difficult to figure out exactly what they believe, and equally important, what they will do once they're elected. How many of you have ever voted for candidates and then you discover that once they assume office, they're not the people you thought they were? You ever had this happen? I usually have it happen. But I've had some good experiences around here, I'll have to admit. But there's, this is common. That's not going to be a problem with me, because tonight I'm going to speak clearly about who I am, what I believe, and what my objectives are once I'm in office. In the audience tonight, we have Republicans, we have Democrats, we have Independents. Now, what do these people all have in common? Well, many of them, at least, have heard me speak or engaged me in political dialogue in the past. And if members of the press tonight here, I don't know how many are present, but members of the press that are here tonight, if you'll take the time and ask these people, what you'll find is I don't change who I am or what I believe based on who I'm talking to. I'm a straight shooter on that. Like I said, I won't change my message. My message, my beliefs, my values are going to be consistent, and hopefully they'll be well articulated. That said, let me begin by explaining why I decided to run for the U.S. Senate. I am a committed Republican. Now that's with a little r. And that's more important than being one with a big R. Okay? As an historian, I am intimately aware that functioning republics are a rarity in history. And the reason for that is they're difficult to maintain. You see, the problem with modern politics is that we are led to believe that most problems are institutional in nature. That is, if we tinker with this bureaucratic structure or that tax policy or pursue this economic policy, then everything's going to be okay. And I'm not saying that these things are not important. Far from it. I mean, if I'm elected to the U.S. Senate, that's the type of issues I'll have to deal with a lot of times. But to have a functioning republic, it takes more. It takes Republican virtues. And when I say Republican virtues, once again, I mean with a little r. So what are these Republican virtues? To begin with, we need to understand, this kind of runs counter to everything you've been told all your life, but a republic is not for everybody. It's just not. A republic is only appropriate to free people. That is, people who enjoy liberty. But if you ever ask yourself, what is liberty? You know, some people say, well, it's the ability to do what one wants, to engage in any activity one can imagine. That's not liberty, that's just license. Liberty is the ability to distinguish between good and bad, and to avoid becoming a slave to vice, and therefore it's inseparably linked to virtue. Now, as a medieval philosopher, John of Salisbury once noted, all agree that virtue is more splendid than liberty. For to all right-thinking men it is clear that true liberty issues from no other source. Wherefore, since all agree that virtue is the highest good in life, and that it alone can strike off the heavy and hateful yoke of slavery, it has been the opinion of philosophers that men should die, if the need arose, for the sake of virtue, which is the only reason for living. Therefore, a man is free in proportion to the measure of his virtues, and the extent to which he is free determines what his virtues can accomplish. While, on the other hand, it is the vices alone that bring about slavery and subject a man to persons and things and undue obedience. And though slavery of the person may seem at times to be more pity, in reality, slavery to vices is ever far more wretched. And so what is more lovely than liberty, and what more agreeable to a man who has any reverence for virtue? Now you're asking, what the heck does all that talk about virtue have to do with modern politics? Okay, that's stuff of the past. No. And if you think about it, that's what the vast majority of political thinkers in the modern world think. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about Machiavelli, Hobbes, Locke, to virtually every contemporary thinker of note, they've either ignored the ancient distinction between virtue and vice, or they've reversed the concept so that ancient vices become modern virtues. Think of the lessons taught by most modern schools of economic thought. Greed is either a good thing or it's a neutral force that must be channeled for noble purposes. And what's the result of all this? Well, to begin with, we can look at the financial crisis of 2008, which still plagues us to this day. Politicians and their money backers prompted banks to make loans to people who couldn't afford to make the payments. You know, we can consider the Fairness in Housing Act. We didn't ask ourselves the question, could people afford the houses? The virtue of self-control went out the window. In addition, people bought houses bigger than they ever needed. Greed. Well, what did greed do? Greed made people see houses as investments instead of as a place to live. Banks saw ways of making more money. The Clinton administration pushed through the Regal Nil Interstate Banking and Branching Efficiency Act, which permitted national banks to acquire banks anywhere in the nation. This allowed for the creation of banks that were too big to fail. Now, that's a moral issue. It's not just an economic issue. In 1999, the Clinton administration pushed through the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act that had separated commercial banks, that is savings and loans, banks that we use, right, from investment firms, banks that traded and underwrote stocks. Basically, this put banks in the gambling business. I ought to mention tonight, when I speak of banks, I'm not talking about small regional banks. Small regional banks serve a purpose, like housing loans, things like that. I'm talking about large national banks. That's what we're talking about. Okay. And so what we see is, so what do these measures pass? Well, modern economic theory. Greed is not a vice because once we've taken morality out of the equation, there is no such thing as vice, only forces. And so greed ceases, like I said, to be a vice and simply becomes a force to be managed, maybe even for good. However, most reasonable people still understand the difference between good and bad. You see, it's simple. Bad is bad. Greed, bad. Dishonesty, bad. Cowardly behavior, bad. Reckless behavior, bad. It's simple. On the other hand, most of the contemporary governing class of this nation, those who determine social, economic, and political policies, no longer understand the proper role of virtue. They shy away from words like vice. Instead, what they're interested in is manipulation. Tweaking this or that policy, or placing their faith simply in technology. Hence, instead of encouraging virtue, they encourage creativity, hoping that someone will make some radical breakthrough to get the world out of the mess that they in large part created. They are like compulsive liars who hope to get themselves out of a web of deceit that they've weaved for themselves by coming up with an ever more elaborate lie. Now, whatever the case in society, a society in which people can't govern themselves, I'm talking about on an individual basis, is a society where people can't govern themselves on a collective basis. So how do we go about fixing this mess and restoring the health of the republic? To begin with, it is helpful to understand the origin of that word. Republic comes from the Latin res publica, which means public things. Now that means this, the republic, belongs to us, the citizenry. It doesn't belong to corporations. It doesn't belong to special interests. It doesn't belong to political parties. And above all, it does not belong to a professional political class separate from the government. Now, the word politics is connected to the ancient Greek term polis, that is the ancient Greek city-state. Classical Greek polis were self-governing entities, where to be a citizen meant that one had some say-so over the policies that impacted your life. One of the things that characterized ancient Greek city-states was that their citizenry played a role in determining the course of their communities. This is what separated the Greeks from those that they called the barbarians. You know, for them, barbarians were those who simply followed the dictates of kings, had a separate governing class. And this is one of the problems in the current political climate. We are creating a governing class that is daily becoming more and more separate from those that it governs. And what's the result of all this? Well, I've done enough talking for a second. I'll talk a little bit more in just a little bit, but let me ask you guys this. How many people in here, I picked a bad night because I got to explain this. Tonight's also the district-wide parent-teacher conference, so I may not get any hands to come up. But how many of you guys are either elementary or secondary teachers or related to an elementary or secondary teacher? Anybody? Raise your hands high. Okay? Let me ask you this. Compared to a few years ago, how much time do you have to prepare for your students' actual education? How much time do you have? Is it more or less? How much less?
Much less.
A lot less. Well, what are you spending your time doing?
I don't anymore. I'm retired, but I can tell you, my friends spend a whole lot of time either testing or recording or meetings or learning something supposedly that's new
That's it.
that didn't do a bit of good.
That's it. What we have is we have a political class who feels the need to do something. Now notice, it's not that they see a problem and want to fix it. They just feel the need to do something. And so one of the easy things, why don't we have education reform? That's a way of saying they're going to screw it up. Let me ask you this. How many educators are in the Oklahoma State legislature? Well, I don't know that any of them are, because really, if you're a teacher, you can't run for it. It's called the conflict of interest, is what they say. Gee, that's kind of funny, because the legislature writes laws, but there's sure a lot of lawyers up there. Okay, let me ask you this. Second question. Another problem we see. How many medical doctors or spouses of medical doctors or family members of medical doctors do we have in here tonight? Raise your hand. A few, well, we got two. Okay, sorry. Okay. And compared to a few years ago, how much time do doctors have to spend with their patients? Less. And again, who sets this policy? That could be both state, or more likely, that's a federal problem. Take a look at the background of most U.S. senators. Now, Coburn was a doctor, is a doctor. Okay, I'll give you that. But how many other legislators at the national level do you know that are doctors? Take a look at the background of most U.S. senators and see how many are in truth professional politicians. That is, for the vast majority of their careers, is all they've done is politics. That's it. Check it. Check this stuff out. Don't take my word for it. There are exceptions. That's just it. They're the exceptions. They're not the rule. The rule are professional politicians. Now, take, for example, one of my main challengers. Because why run if there were already good choices out there? Well, I've decided they're not. So take one of my main challengers for the position that I'm running against, T.W. Shannon. Google up his bio. If you don't believe a word I tell you tonight, look this stuff up on yourself, okay? But Google up his bio. He started out as a field representative for one congressman, then he became a field representative for another congressman, then he became a state representative, and then at the ripe old age of 35, he became the Speaker of the House. Now, it's true that Mr. Shannon's bio does contain some experience in the private sector. According to one of the things that I read, he operates a home-based public relations business. Great. Professional politician and part-time PR guy. I'm sure you can sell yourself, Mr. Shannon. Now, take, for example, other politicians around here on the positive side. One's not here tonight, but I'll throw this out in his favor. And how many of you know Ron Justice? Okay. Ron Justice, on the other hand, spent an entire career in agriculture before he ever ran for political office. He retired before he ran for political office. And so by the time he held office in a largely rural district, he had practical experience dealing with the issues that face rural Americans. That's the way politics is supposed to operate. We have tonight, where'd he go? Jim, where are you? Oh, there you are, okay. We have tonight Jim Weir. Jim Weir spent 30 years in law enforcement before he ever ran for sheriff. So he had a little practical experience first. Now, members of the press keep asking me, well, what experience do you have? Or some just list me as that candidate who has never held office. So what experience would I bring to the Senate? Well, first of all, like most of you here tonight, I have had to face the consequences of other people's policies all my adult life. In other words, I've had to eat a lot of food, but I've never acquired a taste for it. So I am intimately aware that if you elect me as your U.S. Senator, the legislation that I vote on will have an impact on real lives and real livelihood. That is, the decision of people in the legislature impact people. I'm aware of that. Why am I aware of that? Well, look, at the end of the month, my wife and I are lucky if we have a couple of $100 in the bank account, and it's not because we're spendthrifts. How many does that sound familiar to? Raise your hands if that's familiar to you. Now, some of you are thinking, you got a couple of $100 in the bank account. Well, you knew that's why you're running for Republican. You're a fat cat. Okay, so anyway, now, the thing is, policymakers and administrators of all type like to brag about bold policy directives that they intend to pursue. They like to say stuff like, we're facing a crisis and it is not time to be timid. Well, that sounds really nice if I've got $1 million in my bank account, but if you're living paycheck to paycheck, that's a different story. Roy Rogers used to say, be brave, but never take chances. Well, if you elect me to the Senate, I will continue to be brave, but when it comes to your lives and your livelihood, I'm not taking any chances. Now, what does that mean in practical terms? Well, first of all, I will never be rushed into using working people's tax revenue to save the skins of those who have gambled away their corporation's wealth. Endeavor to never transfer wealth of working Americans to multinational corporations who have no homeland and consequently have no patriotism. Similarly, I will never vote to put the lives of our brave servicemen at risk on foreign fields unless our nation is directly threatened. Armed forces is to protect this country, not to fight for someone else's freedom, and certainly not to pick a winner in a confused civil war. Anyway, I may not be a professional politician, but I am a student of politics. For decades now, my job has been to study and teach about how republics rise and fall. My area of specialties, the history of Greece and Rome. One gave us the polis, the origin word politics, as we understand it, and the other maintained a republic for 500 years. That's 500 years where people could govern themselves. I hope we make it that long. I hope we make it that long. I also teach courses on the constitutional development of England and France, nations whose political experience greatly influenced the ideas of our own founding fathers. And since senators are expected to stay abreast of foreign affairs, I should note that I'm knowledgeable of contemporary world affairs as well. My knowledge comes not only from the research that I undertake to prepare classes like my modern political geography course that I'm able to teach, but also from valuable first-hand experiences. At the various institutions at which I've worked, I have had students and colleagues from all over the world. I have spent countless hours discussing world affairs with Egyptians, Palestinians, Israelis, Iranians, Jordanians, Pakistanis, Indians, Chinese, Koreans, Latin Americans, and people from all over Africa and Europe. For example, when I worked at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, the person whose office was next to mine was a former parliament member from Nigeria. So I kind of know how African politics works. And it's not like the way you see it in textbooks. By the way, that's not the only current or foreign or former member of a foreign government that I've talked to. So I keep abreast of that. I don't just listen to the news. I listen to what's going on actually there. As students who have taken my political geography class, the modern world can attest. By the way, does anybody in this audience have any one of those classes? Raise your hands. Okay, look at this. Who here's in the press tonight? How many press members do we have? Okay, I want you to look. Keep your hands up, guys. Look over here. Look over here. Now, did I not, over a year before the election took place, call the first and second rounds of the French election? Raise your hands. Is that not true? I called it over a year ahead of time. Not one political pundit on the national media did that. Not one. I did it. Is it because I'm a genius? I'm not a genius. I see the world as it is, not as I want it to be. So when it comes to foreign policy experience, yeah, I have more than Mr. Langford or Mr. Shannon. And I'll stick by that. Now, however, since the main concern of a U.S. senator should be this country, I can also assure you that I've taught courses on American history, particularly those dealing with the founding of this republic. And I'm very familiar with the vision that the founding fathers had of this nation. One of the key assumptions that most of the founding fathers held was that for this republic to endure, it needed to be led by people of practical experience, not political, professional politicians, I should say. Let me give you an example. Washington, George Washington, my favorite founding father. George Washington, he served 2 terms and he said, I'm not going to do this anymore. Now when he said this, he didn't say because I'm tired. He wanted to do it. You know, Washington had an ego, okay? He's not the perfect guy, but he understood he had an ego. And he understood that for the good of the republic, he only needed to serve 2 times. Now, if he wanted to, he could have been president for life. He could have stayed forever. But he didn't do it. Why? Not because he didn't want to, but why? Because it was bad for the Republic. Now, that's what it means to be a citizen politician, not to stay forever. You don't say, well, I got to stay a little bit longer so I can see it through. You never see it through. Nothing ever ends. There's never a peaceful time. You've got to learn your limitations. Now, within a few decades of American independence, most of Latin America gained its independence from Spain and Portugal. That is, we have Colombia, Mexico, Venezuela, Brazil. All these places gained their independence. And you can look at the founding fathers of these places, that is, the great heroes of Latin American Revolution. People like Simón Bolívar. Okay, these are decent men. These are men with lofty ideas. And lo and behold, when they gained their independence, they copied their constitution after our constitution. What happened though? Well, these guys thought, well, to make sure everything goes smoothly, we probably need to stay in power a little bit. And these guys are Republicans, little r's. And they're thinking, we need to stay in so we can preserve democracy. And so it all became that it was dependent on them. And so what happened to every single country in Latin America within a few decades? Dictatorships. The difference between Bolivar and Washington was not that Washington was a more moral man than Bolivar. Bolivar may have been a more moral man than Washington. But the difference was Washington knew human vice. And he knew that having a professional political class is not good. That was the difference. And so he stepped down. Now, some of you, I believe that T.W. Shannon, I believe he's a good moral man. But as his record demonstrates, he is a professional politician. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, well, now, Crow, where's your party loyalty? Remember the Republican First Commandment, large R. Remember the Republican First Commandment, thou shalt not speak against a fellow Republican. Let me assure you this, I am a conservative, make no mistake about it. But a candidate should not be judged on his party loyalty, but his loyalty to the citizens he serves. The primary concern of an elected official in a republic must be the well-being of the citizens of that republic. That said, I now want to turn my attention to the other major candidate in the race, James Langford. You're thinking, well, why are you running, Crow? It's like I said, got problems with you. Now, ever since 2008, and in fact, for a little bit longer than that, American workers have faced serious economic difficulties. Among other things, it should be the job of an American senator to alleviate, as best he can, the plight of American workers. Or at the very least, not make the situation worse. Okay? At the very least, just don't make it worse. Now, it doesn't matter whether that citizen can trace his ancestors to the American Revolution, or if he's a member of a Native American tribe and has been here long before we white people got here, okay? Doesn't matter. Or whether that citizen is a first-generation American. If they have their citizenship for the last 6 months. It doesn't matter to me. Nor does it matter whether that citizen is black, whether that citizen is white, of Asian descent, or Latino. That's not important either. Whatever the case, for an American senator, the interest of American citizens, of American workers, must come before the interest of the cheap labor advocates who continually push for an amnesty that will create over 10 million competitors for American workers in this struggling job market. Now, Mr. Langford will parse words, and he'll tell you, well, I'm not for an amnesty. Go to his own website then, and why does he put up these apologetic letters all the time? Check his own website out, not my stuff, his own stuff. And look how he always tries to apologize. He seems to be hedging his bets to me. He wants to say, well, it's not really to do with this. Let me say this. I will not hedge my bets. I will not support an amnesty, not immediately. I will not over a 4-year period of time. I will not over a 10-year period of time. Is that clear enough? Early in this announcement speech, I mentioned how in 1999, the Clinton administration pushed through the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act that separated commercial banks, that is savings and loans, from investment firms, banks that traded and underwrote stocks, and basically put these types of banks in the gambling business. You know what happens with gamblers? You're always going to lose eventually, okay? Well, after the financial crisis of 2008, Congress temporarily wised up and sought to force banks to put most of the risky trades outside of the bank into separately capitalized subsidiaries where losses would not be guaranteed by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. The problem is, last October the 29th, check this out on your own. Because what got me with it was I didn't see this on ABC, I didn't see it on NBC, I didn't see it on CBS, I didn't see it on MSNBC, I didn't see it on our savior Fox News. I didn't see it on any of these. So-called liberals, so-called conservatives. I didn't see it on any of these. You'll have to check this out on your own. Actually, I saw it reading an article in Market Watch and had nothing to do with political policy. It was just mentioned in passing. I'm like, that's interesting. So I looked it up myself. Well, last October the 29th, a bill passed with the support of James Lankford that would allow the banks to trade almost all complex derivatives without quarantining them in any separate affiliate. Ultimately, what this means is it set us up for another financial meltdown. At least as bad as 2008, if not worse. Thanks again, Mr. Lankford, for looking after the working people and taxpayers of this country. It's time to go. It's time to go. And it's sure the hell not time to be in the Senate. Okay. So in conclusion, if I win, what am I going to do? Am I going to fix Washington? No. Now that may surprise people. They're thinking, wait a minute, you're not going to fix it? You're supposed to say you're going to fix it. You're going to clean it up. No, I'm not going to start my campaign by lying to you. I'm not a very good liar, and I'm too old to start becoming a good liar. Is the economy going to improve or foreign policy become more rational? I don't know. So what good am I? Well, first of all, I will work for the people of Oklahoma and put them first. I can say that. Second of all, I will remind politicians in Washington to whom they are accountable, which is going to make a lot of people mad on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
And lastly, in the 2 or 8 years that I have the privilege of serving this state, because I'm not going to be a professional politician, I'm running for this one to finish out this 2-year term. If I win, I will run again in 2 years for that 6-year term. And then that's it for the U.S. Senate. If 8 years is good enough for Washington, it's good enough for me. I'm not a professional politician. I'm a teacher. That's what I am. I'm a teacher going into politics. And I intend to keep teaching when I'm a senator. What do you mean? In school? No. What I mean is by example. I want to show what it means to be a citizen politician, not a professional politician. And so after those 8 years, or 2 years if you get mad at me, after those 8 years, I'm out. I'm out. I don't know why anybody would want to stay in Washington more than 8 years. I am not the man on a white horse who has come to save the republic. I am no Caesar. Any republic where people are truly in need of a man on a white horse to fix all their problems is no longer one made up of free people, and it's consequently doomed. All that I am is a man who knows his duty, will step aside when his time has passed, and will place his trust in the free men and free women who come afterwards. Now, if what I've said tonight resonates with you, I would appreciate your vote and your support in the Republican primary in June, and also the general election in November. I was going to thank you before time and end it there, but I did want to mention one last thing. A number of people have contacted me concerning questions. They just send questions in, and I've had a lot of these, and you have no idea how many I'm getting, okay? I'm willing to answer any important political question that one poses to me, but I want to do this in a time-effective manner. So let me begin by answering the most frequently asked question, okay? Not saying this is the most important, I'm just saying it's the most frequently asked question that I get, and that is concerning the right to bear arms. Again, I'm not saying this is one of my most important questions. I'm just saying it's the frequently asked. So if it's the frequently asked, you guys think it's important, so I guess I should answer it, okay? By the way, that's my policy, too. You ask me something, I'll give you an answer. Don't expect me to fly off the handle and give you an answer in 2 seconds. I may say, give me a week. Because one of the reasons that I'm running for the Senate, not the House, temperamentally, I'm a senator. I do things slowly. I listen, and I think about it, and then I give you an answer. I don't just fly off the handle. Okay, does that make sense? I do fly off the handle, but not with policy. Just with those kids. We have good kids. I am a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. The right to bear arms is a guarantor of our liberty as American citizens. I will fight to protect that right. As a gun owner, I am well aware of an alarming trend in this country where it looks as though people may be infringing on our right to bear arms, not by taking away our guns, but by tampering with the supply or cost of ammo. Yeah. How many gun owners in here? How many buy bullets? Is what I'm saying true or false? Very true. Very true. Now, I have to admit, it may be, this disruption might be due to free market forces. It may be. Okay? I don't know. But I do know this. If I'm elected senator, I will look into the matter. And if there's anything nefarious involved, then we're going to call some people to account. Hopefully there's not something nefarious. I'd love to think it's just free market forces. I'm hoping it is. Because if it's not, I'm going to be a busy guy. And by the way, now, here's another thing. Now, this may be kind of unpopular among Republicans, but it's true, and I have to just say it. There is another guarantor of our liberty as well, and that's the press. That's the press. I've had a number of people to advise me saying, be cautious, they'll trick you. But the fact is, it is the duty of journalists to inform the American public and to keep politicians honest. And that's hard. We should respect the journalists. Therefore, when it comes to important questions of political nature, you understand what I mean by that, important questions of political nature. I don't watch Duck Dynasty. I have no idea what's going on with that. That's not earth-shattering. Okay? There's a lot of questions I can throw up. I just don't know because I got 2 kids. And I'm not keeping up with pop culture that much. But if it's an important question of a political nature, even if I don't want to answer it, because, I'll admit this, I'm not this courageous person. I don't like to answer tough questions. But the fact is, if I get in office, guess what? It's my job! If it's of an important nature, I'll answer your questions. I will. Okay? Now, I may not get second, but I'll get to you real soon. I may have to study it a little bit. I've had questions that I've never considered before that people have sent me. Think about that. But here's the thing. Just as the right to bear arms entails responsibilities, so too must members of the press remember their responsibility. Honest and productive journalism should not be a gotcha game. Let's ask him that question at 3 in the morning. What do you think about so-and-so? I'm going to kill you. Let's see what he says. We got him! Okay. No. It should endeavor to elicit honest, thoughtful responses. Now, the fact is, I might give you a response that most people disagree with. That's a possibility. But I'll give you my honest response. That's what you want. Okay? But we don't want knee-jerk reactions. We don't want to play the gotcha game. What I would like to do is this. I want to